Double digits in the nosebleeds section. Welcome to episode 10 of FTN from the Nosebleeds MMA podcast, hosted by myself, Brick Harris, and my good pal, Blake O'Rulian. We are installed in the FTN studio, ready to give you news, updates, and analysis on all things MMA. A special thanks, as always, to Don't Be a Richard Music, Robert Jemias, and Sosi Wear Clothing. Content provided today by Verdict MMA, Octagon Updates, and Geek MMA, and of course, your hosts. Blake, one question for you. What to do, baby?
Coming up in today's show, we are going to be talking about UFC Tampa, recapping the main event, along with a lot of the performance bonuses and some of the crazy highlights that happened this weekend. We are also going to be talking about the women's strawweight division and who is the champion 1 year from now. Also, we're going to be comparing the UFC's promotion versus a Bellator and a One Championship and all the other fighting promotions around the world. Now, round 4, we're going to be talking about what is our dream matchups for the return of Anthony Rumble Johnson. Round 5, we are going to be previewing UFC Boston, Yair Rodriguez, Jeremy Stevens, Chris Weidman, Dominic Reyes. But first, we want to talk about our top 5 this week with Joanna and Jacek's dominant win. Who are the top 5 active women's fighters in the UFC today?
All right, my top 5 fighters in the women's divisions. This has changed in the past few months, but as of right now, I'm sticking with it. I like my list how it is right now. Coming in at number 5, Joanna Jacek. Her fight last weekend, I think, solidified in my mind and a lot of people's minds that she will be making at least an attempt at the strawweight belt probably in the next year and a half at least. Just with so much going on, it's kind of hard to say she's a shoo-in for a title shot in the next year just because the strawweight division is kind of like, I don't know, the lightweight division for the men's side. Yeah. Exactly, it's stacked. Coming in at number 4, Weili Zhang. I love Weili Zhang, okay? I watched so many of her fights over the last couple of days. She's on a 20-fight win streak. A 20-fight win streak. The only loss of her career was her first professional fight. She absolutely dominated. I don't even want to say dominated. I just more want to say picked apart. She absolutely picked apart Jessica Andrade, and she's the strawweight title holder for right now, and it's a great time to be Weili Zhang. Number 3, Valentina Shevchenko. She is in a league of her own. She, I think, makes this list for me just because she's in that weight division where there's not as much competition, there's not as much going on, there's not as many heavy hitters like there are in the upper or lower women's weight classes, but she's still definitely a dominant force at flyweight, and I think she will continue to be. Number 2, Chris Cyborg, coming in at number 2. For the longest time, Chris Cyborg was the most terrifying human being in the UFC. Not even like gender distinction, just human being in the UFC. She was horrifying, and she was stomping girls out, and she was defeating people left and right, and it wasn't even close fights. Like, she was just embarrassing people, and she was just it was unreal what Cyborg did. Now, this is going to be obvious who comes in at number 1. I think no idea. I think you and I both are going to have her at number 1, Amanda Nunes.
She's like number 7.
If you're going to put Chris Cyborg in this list, and then you take Amanda Nunes, who defeated the Cyborg, the undefeatable woman in the UFC, and Amanda Nunes, now a 2-division champ. She is the most dominant female fighter the UFC has ever seen, and for right now, I think she's the most dominant we will ever see. She's, like you said last week, she's the fighter who, if you took a GSP, a John Jones, all these legends in their prime and fought them, and she's knocked all of them out. So she is basically the John Jones of all of women's UFC, only I dare say better. So there's my top 5.
All right, for my top 5, it's very similar to yours. I think that there really is an upper echelon of great fighters in the UFC, past champions and things like that. But there's fighters who have come out of their prime, and currently in their prime. Right now, today, I think that the number 5, I'm going to go with Tatiana Suarez. She's 8-0. She has dominated pretty much everyone she's beaten, and her amateur record is good. Her wrestling record is good. Just the best grappler in women's MMA. Number 4, I'm going to go with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. She looked so good on Saturday. She looked, coming off of a big layoff, coming off of a nasty weight cut from, reports, what people have been saying. She looked incredible against no joke in Michelle Watterson whatsoever. You and I both picked Michelle to win that fight. Joanna looked so good coming off of that layoff, and she's my number 4 active women's fighter. Number 3, same as you, Valentina Shevchenko, absolutely dominant at the flyweight division, the women's flyweight division. Number 2, I'm going to go with Chris Cyborg. Chris Cyborg is, like you said, before Amanda Nunes, she was the greatest women's fighter of all time, hadn't lost in over a decade. Absolutely incredible. And then number 1, the woman who knocked her out, beat Valentina Shevchenko, has beaten pretty much everybody, all of the women's legends. Amanda Nunes comes in at number 1. You already know what I think of Amanda Nunes. She is top notch in the women's division and the greatest women's fighter of all time.
It's interesting how, just really quick, how both of our 1s and 2s were the same, and I think for the same reason, right? Like Chris Cyborg was the number 1 women's pound for pound fighter for a long time,
right?
Until she got Amanda Nunes'd. And now Amanda Nunes is very confidently and comfortably holding that top spot.
To make this a little more interesting, I'll throw in the fact that and I've said this, I mention her almost every week. I think Tatiana Suarez has the potential. I know she doesn't fight at 35 or 45 like Nunes or Cyborg at 45, but I think Tatiana Suarez, if she can beat the right names, has absolutely an opportunity to be put with a Nunes, a Cyborg, and a Shevchenko.
All right, let's get into round 1. Seeing as UFC Tampa was just a few days ago, we have some honorable mentions. We have some things we'd like to go over. Some congratulations, I think, are definitely in order. Blake, do you want to start it off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, I don't know where it lands in your knockouts of the year, because I think Steven Peterson is still there. Obviously, Jorge Masvidal is still there. But Nico Price.
Yikes.
Nico Price, man. Knocking out James Vick, sending him into another dimension. I truly just want to ask you, where does that rank in your top knockouts of the year?
I think as far as creativity, and just it's one of those moments where it's kind of like a lateral in football. It's like one of the last things you expect, right? A knockout from your back off of a heel strike,
it's only happened 4 times in the UFC,
right.
In the UFC, and he's 2 of them.
I think we need to rename the strike, the Nico kick, or
the
whatever.
Nico Price kick.
Whatever you want to call it. Sure.
Yeah.
I think it definitely ranks top 3 of the year. Like you just said, you mentioned the other 2. But yeah, it was incredible. Absolutely insane. Stunning. It was one of those knockouts where after you watch it, you go, wait, did that just happen?
When I saw James Vick just fall, I was like, did that? It was the exact same response. Did that just happen? Did I just see him literally kick him with his heel and knock out James Vick? It was so interesting to me. Anyways, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she looked incredible. I thought she looked so good. She looks hungry, and I don't take it for granted anymore when she says she wants that title. I'm taking it seriously now, and I think I know you talked about, she might not be the first front runner, but that's what everybody's been saying is the winner of that fight gets Weili Zhang in her first fight back. So, obviously the fight isn't official yet, but I think the next fighter is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and she gets that title shot really quick.
I think it's very true that Joanna reclaimed her reputation of contention last weekend, meaning she lost twice to Thug Rose Namajunas. She fell off the horse a little bit, and she was trying to get back on. Last weekend was her getting back on, and she very much reclaimed her name of being up there with the top fighters in the strawweight division.
What did you think of Krone's performance?
Honestly, what I thought was going to happen was very different from what actually did happen.
I think the number one thing that I took away from that fight was Kron Gracie needs to learn how to wrestle. Because like Ben Askren said on his podcast, jiu-jitsu has judo throws. Jiu-jitsu practices single legs, double legs, but there is no jiu-jitsu takedown. Typically, when you're sparring, when you're rolling, you start on your knees, or if you're standing, typically the wrestler gets the better end of the stick on those. Crone Gracie is such a great jiu-jitsu practitioner, but especially in a later round when you're sweaty and you're slick, you are not going to be able to pull guard. You just can't. And so Crone, in my opinion, in order to become the legitimate star that I think he truly is destined to be, I mean, yes, I was absolutely wrong, but I still think he has all the potential in the world. He took shot after shot from Cub Swanson, body shot after body shot. I mean, he was bloodied up and beaten and bruised, but he still stayed up the entire fight. He just needs to learn how to wrestle, sharpen up his striking game, and he looks good. Go ahead.
No, I have no problem with that. I think Crone Gracie is definitely going to be a title contender, if not a belt holder, in the featherweight division in the coming years.
One of the things that bothered me was the day after Crone posted a picture of him. It looked like he was outside, maybe by a pool, and he was all busted up and bruised, and he said, "You couldn't walk a mile in my shoes." And it threw me off. Personally, I do jiu-jitsu, and it threw me off because to me, you either win or you learn. It's one of the two. And it's when you lose in jiu-jitsu, it's not supposed to be a, "Hey, I lost, F you to everybody who thinks that I suck." It should be time to get better. And I wish that was more of the way that Crone said it. But after the fight even, he said, "I thought I won the fight," which I don't think anybody else in the world thought that he had won that fight. But Crone truly believes that. And I think hopefully he looks back, he watches the fight, realizes that he did lose the fight. And rather than saying, "Oh, I deserve to win that fight, decisions are stupid," he actually learned something from it.
Right. On the flip side, Cub Swanson just propelled himself into featherweight relevancy.
Absolutely.
You saw his emotion after winning, and rightly so. I mean, his striking performance was a clinic, and he just showed the world that he's going nowhere, and he has no intentions of slowing down.
He had lost, I believe, 4 straight fights. He had lost 4 straight fights and comes out and a rising star, a very hyped up star in Crone Gracie, and Cub really just pieced him up, did everything he wanted to him. Let's go ahead and jump into round number 2, the women's strawweight division. Who is the champion 1 year from now? And this was a question posted by Octagon Updates, and we thought it was so interesting. We got their permission, and we're going to answer this question. Brick, who do you have as the strawweight champion of the women's division next year?
If we're talking about who holds the belt the most during 2020, I think it's hands down. But a year from today, or maybe a year from today?
Okay. Yes.
I think it's going to be Tatiana Suarez, because here's why. I mean, you have Weili Zhang, right? She is going to stay at the top of this division for at least, I think she's going to defend the belt at least twice. I think if she fights a Rose Namajunas or if she fights a Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's just quicker. She's so clean and she's so powerful. If you watch her last fight against Jessica Andrade, she looks like Demetrius Johnson. Just so quick and so sharp and insanely powerful. And her wrestling is no joke either. She is a rising star in the women's divisions. She's a rising star in the strawweight. And I mean, she's a belt holder now, so she's a champion. Here's my only problem, though. Fighting is evolving. And we have seen this in the lightweight division of the men's side. Khabib Nurmagomedov, a foreigner, comes in with nothing but wrestling and pure brute strength, just dominance. Doesn't matter if he finishes you or if he takes you to the judges. He's gonna win because of just pure dominance. Tatiana Suarez is the Khabib of the strawweight division. If you watch her last fight, it's terrifying what she did to Carla Esparza. The entire fight, she's on top of her, just mauling her, doing exactly what Khabib does. So I think Tatiana Suarez holds this belt after she defeats Weili Zhang, but I still think Weili Zhang has a very respectable tenor in as a strawweight champion.
So we were talking about this. We were talking about how the strawweight division is kind of like the lightweight division for the men, where it's just so stacked. It's just full of so much talent. And other than a Khabib, who has only fought once this year, and the top of the food chain is Conor, who hasn't fought in a year and a half, or a year. I'm sorry, Conor, who hasn't fought in a year, Tony, who's only fought in once. You've got Gaethje, who's rising up in the ranks. You don't have a whole lot of movement at the top of the lightweight division. At the women's strawweight division, it's been very active. We've had 3 champs this year: Thug Rose, Jessica Andrade, and Weili Zhang. I don't think that pattern stops in 2020. I think that Weili Zhang maybe defends the title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, but in my opinion, I really think Joanna Jędrzejczyk is too long, too smart, too experienced. I think she beats Weili Zhang. However, once Tatiana Suarez comes back from that neck injury that she has, I think Tatiana Suarez gives it to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and then she is going to be the champion for a very long time at the women's strawweight division.
I agree. You can't stop what you can't understand. Seriously, that's what's happening in the lightweight division. You can't stop Khabib because you just can't understand really what it's like until you're in the cage. And I think Tatiana Suarez is the next dominant champion in the UFC women's strawweight division.
Well, Khabib stood out, right? And it's the same thing with Tatiana Suarez, where everyone else is a striker, where everyone else likes to stand. Khabib likes to shoot. Khabib likes to put you up against the cage and trap your legs and smash your face.
Exactly.
Tatiana Suarez likes to do the exact same thing in a division stacked with incredible strikers. That's why I think Tatiana Suarez is champ a year from today. So we want to thank Octagon Updates for that one.
While I agree.
My bad.
No, you're good. While I agree with that, I still think Weili Zhang is a problem. Yeah. She is so unbelievably impressive and on a 20-fight win streak. I think if she faces someone who has lost the title, who is coming back up the hill from a moral downfall in Joanna Jędrzejczyk or a Thug Rose Namajunas, or even possibly a rematch with Jessica Andrade, I think Weili Zhang has the upper hand with confidence, with mentality, and so far with just being cleaner.
She has the momentum. I mean, Jessica Andrade, 21 unanswered shots to win her the title in one round. I mean, she was incredible. However, we'll see. Strawweight is fun.
Yeah.
Women's strawweight is fun.
For sure.
All right, round 3, we're going to be comparing the UFC to other promotions in the world, the biggest promotions, a Bellator, a One Championship, a Ryzen. Brick, what are your thoughts?
So we actually are very excited to announce elsewhere that we have an interview tomorrow with the #1 pound-for-pound fighter under 25 years old. His name is AJ McKee. We interviewed his father 2 weeks ago, I believe. Such a fun interview. We have that tomorrow afternoon. But the #1 pound-for-pound fighter is not out of the UFC. That's incredible, first of all. You have a guy like AJ McKee who holds records as a, 24 years old, 23, yes. 24. Yes. He holds a record in Bellator for the longest standing active win streak in the entire promotion. The guy is 16-0, 16 straight wins in Bellator.
All in Bellator. He started in Bellator.
It's so unbelievably impressive. Here's my thing with Bellator. It is so much more fair, in my opinion, than the UFC. In the UFC, you have to rely so much on your ability to win a crowd over. You have to rely on your dancing if you're Israel Adesanya, your trash talk if you're Conor McGregor, your overall persona if you are a UFC fighter. If you're a Bellator fighter, you don't have to say a word. All you have to do is win fights. And then you get to bigger fight cards, you get to championships, you get to hold belts, and then you make so much more money. So it's so much more fair, in my opinion, in Bellator, but the UFC just has something about it that the Bellator promotion does not.
The UFC is the money-making business. It is a business. Bellator is a fighting league. UFC, you make your money. In the UFC, like you said, if you can talk, if you can dance, if you can be funny off of the camera, if you have a lot of Instagram followers, you are going to get the bigger fights. You're going to get the bigger fight cards. You're going to get the bigger purse. However, in Bellator, you obviously get more of the best fighters get to the next shot. The fun thing about the UFC, and the reason why I typically side with the UFC and watch more of the UFC and follow it closer, is you have so many more fun storylines when there's nothing set in stone. You can say after Nate Diaz wins a big fight over Anthony Pettis, it's not, hey, I'm going to fight I want to fight, the #3 ranked guy or whatever. It's, hey, Jorge Masvidal had a good last fight and broke Ben Askren's undefeated record, as much as I still lose sleep over it. It's so fun to ask the question, who's next? And to build that storyline, to cut those promos, to find two guys that don't like each other. Because at this point, it's AJ talking about Pitbull, who are on different sides of the spectrum. And as much as I believe that both of those two are going to end up in the Bellator Championship, all that is talk for now until it actually happens. Whereas the UFC can go, this guy is the best guy, this guy is the best guy. I don't care what you're ranked. Let's go and put these guys together. And that's why I think the UFC has kind of been able to develop and create such a money-making business and become so popular, is because they create storylines while Bellator has fairness in play.
And although you have AJ McKee and Pitbull talking, and I'm with you, I would put money down that it's going to be those two at the end of the tournament in Bellator. But that's the thing, you never know. Knock on wood, I don't want anything to happen to either of these fighters, but injuries can play a role in massive roles in the Bellator tournament. But you have fighters and you have fights that are promoted and put on in the UFC where it's like, this person doesn't like this person. Forget even what weight class they're in. Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor, they don't like each other. Let's have them fight. Yeah. One of them's a welterweight and the other one was fighting at featherweight. Who cares? That's how the UFC has been so successful, and they have monopolized the game, in my eyes, by capturing so much larger of a fan base just by being able to, I guess, manipulate the system.
Well, they put money on the guys that are going to make them money. They put money into Conor McGregor. They put money into Nate Diaz. Bellator doesn't put money. They put money into the promotion. They put money into the tournament, but that doesn't build the same storyline as two people who don't like each other, two guys who, first of all, want to fight, and two guys that are going to put on a great show. And that's why the UFC is, unfortunately, because I'd love to see other fight promotions do as well, but that's why I think that the UFC is so much farther ahead than any other promotion.
With that being said, though, Bellator is on a rise.
Yes.
That we have probably never seen before, with AJ McKee being the number one pound for pound fighter under 25 years old, and he's never fought in the UFC. He's never fought anywhere but Bellator. These Bellator guys are making a stand, and they are making noise.
The question is, and something that I'm actually going to ask AJ is Bellator for life? Are you always going to be a Bellator guy, or do you wish that you were in the UFC where you could talk a little more trash to get the guy that you want, to get that money fight? And if that's the case, then maybe Bellator does need to maybe switch up the way that they think about these things. But it's all up in the air, and that's going to be a super interesting, fun interview to have.
We'll find out tomorrow. Check it out. Let's get into round 4. I'm actually really excited about this one. This is some rumor, not necessarily rumor, but it has surfaced over social media. It's become factual that Anthony Rumble Johnson is making a comeback to the UFC. Now, the question that we have, because he's flirted with talks of calling out John Jones.
Going down to 205.
Right. He might return to heavyweight. The question we have is, what is your dream matchup, or what do you want to see happen with Anthony Rumble Johnson?
With Anthony Johnson, who has gone from fighting at 170, 185, 205 to now, since he's retired and left the light heavyweight division, he has gotten into powerlifting, which has bulked him up a lot. And I believe he said that he's around 245 right now. And if that's the case, I would love to see him stay at heavyweight. And the reason why is because the light heavyweight division has its rising stars. It has John Jones. The heavyweight division is kind of dead right now. You have Derek Lewis fighting very soon and things like that. But with DC and Stipe wanting to be, making the trilogy match, which I think is a dumb, made-up rivalry that doesn't actually exist. This is going to be to bring a big name like Anthony Rumble Johnson, to bring him into the heavyweight division would be so much fun, to bring him back and things like that. I think that if that's what happens and he goes there, it is the MMA gods' duty to make the greatest power striking match of all time and put Francis Ngannou and Anthony Rumble Johnson across the cage from each other. And this would be probably a 90-second fight. This would be the epitome of absolute brawl. This would be the greatest fight for strike fans, for anybody who enjoys just two guys getting in there and punching each other, which we all know Dana loves. This is the fight to make. Francis Ngannou for the return of Anthony Rumble Johnson at heavyweight.
Here's the thing. It can't be anywhere but heavyweight. Anthony Rumble Johnson has fought at welterweight before. And like you said, he's put on serious poundage. Whether that's good or bad poundage, I don't know. But he's been away from the UFC for 2 years now. So it has to be at heavyweight. And more than the reason that I just stated, he can't fight at light heavyweight. There's way too much going on. He can't sell his stake to be big enough to fight a John Jones after not fighting for 2 years. He's not going to be able to fight a Dominic Reyes or a Chris Weidman or a Johnny Walker. These guys are getting too big. Like, he's going to need to fight someone who has lost in the past year and a half or who has slowly, fallen down the slope. So it's going to have to be at heavyweight, like you said. But I see it against someone with maybe less of a title implication. Like, I think if Rumble Johnson were to beat Francis Ngannou, he would be in the talks to fight the next heavyweight champ.
Well, Francis is, if John Jones doesn't make his way up to heavyweight anytime soon, Francis is the guy to get the next title shot after DC Stipe 3 or whatever.
Right, and we don't even know if that's going to happen. There's just so many moving parts happening, especially in the lightweight division. But in the heavyweight division, Anthony Johnson has the opportunity to put less chips on the table and win more. See, if he were to go down to light heavyweight and put all of his chips on the table and fight someone like Johnny Walker and get starched by a rising star who hasn't necessarily been tested yet, people are going to laugh Rumble Johnson back out of the UFC. But if he goes to heavyweight and he fights a respectable opponent in Derek Lewis, Alistair Overeem, even a Sergey Spivak, just to get back in it, he can put so much less of a risk out there and gain so much more by winning at heavyweight.
Yeah, and I don't think that Anthony Rumble Johnson would necessarily get starched. This is one of the, next to John Jones and Daniel Cormier, he's right there with some of the greatest heavier weighted fighters of all time, one of the greatest strikers we have ever seen. However, who was his biggest rival in the light heavyweight division? It's DC. Yeah. And DC is a heavyweight fighter now. He's got one more fight with Stipe. What's the point of cutting down all that weight for who? John Jones, and maybe he makes a comeback. But he won't get a title shot his first fight back. You're not Conor McGregor. You're not going to be able to get that. Even Uriah Faber, one of the greatest bantamweight fighters of all time, had to fight an up-and-comer in his first fight back. It's going to be the same thing with Rumble Johnson. However, with all the storylines around, I think Ngannou, Johnson, considering the power, the striking, the headlines it would make, I think this makes for one of the greatest people's main events the UFC has ever seen.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to come off as if Anthony Rumble Johnson is anything to scoff at.
Yeah.
His resume is incredible. The only UFC losses that he has is twice to DC, once to Vitor Belfort, and once to Josh Koscheck. So
Vitor Belfort.
Sure. What I'm saying is his resume is no joke, right? He could very much make his name reheard in the UFC, and I think he will, but I just don't think it can be at light heavyweight.
Round number 5, UFC Boston this weekend. Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stevens, Chris Weidman versus Dominic Reyes. Brick, who do you have winning these two big main and co-main events?
Wow. Just
stacked fight card.
Great fight card. I'm a little upset though. My final take deals a lot with the second of the two matchups. So I will give you an answer for one of them and a tentative answer for the other. Okay. As far as the main event, Chris Weidman and Dominic Reyes, I don't know enough about either fighter to necessarily make a solid pick. However, I do see the winner of this fight probably getting a title shot at light heavyweight. If you think about it, Chris Weidman is a legend.
At 185.
Sure, legend at 185, but going up weight, it's not like he's going to lack any power. He destroyed one of the greatest fighters of all time twice in Anderson Silva. He already has beef with John Jones over just like some Twitter stuff. But if he were to defeat this undefeated rising prospect in Dominic Reyes, that's huge. He will kind of re-solidify himself as a contender, although he has, I think, 4 of his last fights are losses. He's kind of trying to find his way back into UFC relevancy. Now, if Dominic Reyes wins this fight, I argue that it's even bigger for him. He's 11-0, undefeated in the UFC, undefeated, obviously, in his entire career. And if he goes against a legend in Chris Weidman, a man who has defeated Anderson Silva twice, a man who has held middleweight gold for months at a time, then this guy catapults himself into the conversation of going from a rising star to a real contender. And then I think, honestly, the winner of this fight gets a title shot at John Jones in the next 6 months.
So this fight kind of scares me for a lot of reasons that you're talking about. Chris Weidman versus Dominic Reyes reminds me a lot of Luke Rockhold's light heavyweight debut this year. When you get older and you decide that you can't cut the weight that you used to and you want to move up because maybe, unfortunately, you're not all the way in the game anymore. We saw it with James Vick, moved up in a weight class, got knocked out. Luke Rockhold goes up in a weight class, gets knocked out. Chael Sonnen this year goes up in a weight class, gets rocked, and then finished in the second round. Your chin cannot take the blows when you go up a weight class when you're used to something 20 pounds lighter. And so I think Dominic Reyes does get this done. And I think that Dominic Reyes absolutely gets the title shot after this, considering the Thiago Santos injury, which is going to keep him sidelined for a while. I think Dominic Reyes wins this fight relatively easily because, again, we also haven't seen Chris Weidman in 2.5 years. That layoff is not going to be good for him. Going up in a weight class and taking on a guy who is 11-0 at 205, I don't see this being much of a competition. Don't get me wrong. I think a prime Weidman beats a Dominic Reyes, but
see, but that's why I stray away from making such a harsh pick here, because I made a harsh pick. We both did last week in Thomas Gifford.
I've been really dumb the last few weeks.
No. I'm just saying we made a harsh pick, right? We took a side with Thomas Gifford, and all respect to the man, but he fought a Mike Davis who was making the jump from featherweight to lightweight, just as Chris Weidman is doing. And now I know Mike Davis has probably a third of the fights that Chris Weidman has.
It's different. It's different because of this. The difference between 145 and 155 is 10 pounds. It's not nearly as much as 20 pounds. Also a 2.5-year layoff. Also, Mike Davis is an incredible striker and things like that.
Right. All I'm saying is, though, the jump for some fighters can be beneficial. And I think it definitely was beneficial for Mike Davis this last weekend. It could be. That's why I'm saying if Chris Weidman pulls this off, then yeah, this win is so much more impressive than if he were to just jump 10 pounds and if he didn't have a 2-year layoff. If he has this 2-year layoff and jumps 20 pounds to fight at 205 for the first time and he defeats an undefeated prospect, mind-blowing victory.
Do you think he gets a title shot? I think Dominic Reyes gets a title shot because he's gone through the light heavyweight division. I think if Weidman gets this fight, he gets a fight maybe with an Anthony Smith or something like that. Somebody to test him. Even a Gustafsson in his return. That would be a great fight. But I don't think he gets Jones in his light heavyweight debut, gets a win over Dominic Reyes, and then immediately jumps into a light heavyweight gold. I just don't see that happening.
That's what's beautiful about the UFC. If this were to happen, I can see Chris Weidman blowing up the DMs of John Jones. If Chris Weidman pulls this off, he's got bragging rights until he faces a Johnny Walker or a John Jones or another light heavyweight threat because of this 2-year layoff, because of this giant weight jump. If he pulls this off, he can talk all the smack that he wants until he gets that title shot, which I think he will.
I don't want to jump over your final thought, but Yair Rodriguez, Jeremy Stephens, who do you have tentatively?
Jeremy.
He switched it! He switched his stance.
Now let's jump into final thoughts, shall we? I'm about to do something that I've never done on the show. I'm going to go back on my word. I'm going to change a pick, specifically the pick of Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stephens this weekend at UFC Boston. Now, there's something about a grudge match. There's something about revenge. Yair Rodriguez's reaction to what happened in Mexico has left a bitter taste in my mouth, in the mouth of, I'm sure, Yair Rodriguez, and in the mouth of UFC fans in general. However, it wasn't even the fight that I believe will lead to the downfall of Yair Rodriguez. Although it ended in an eye poke, very controversial, that is not, in my opinion, what will be the downfall of this great Mexican fighter. It was the crowd reaction, the lack of class, respect, and grace that this game needs if you want to win. In the late 90s and the early 2000s, the Detroit Pistons were known as the Bad Boys, the NBA team who had all the talent and all the attitude. In June 2004, they won the illustrious NBA championship. Later that same year, one of the most infamous events in all of American sports took place in Detroit. Trash, drinks, and slurs were rained down on the opposition that day. Since that day, 15 years ago, the Pistons have never won another NBA championship. In fact, in the past decade, the Pistons have never won a single playoff game. What happened in Detroit in 2004 is very similar to what happened in Mexico just a few weeks ago. Although there was no brawl in Mexico after the eye poke and the disrespectful incident, the disrespect of an opponent, of an interviewer, of a culture in general was displayed on national television for the entire world to see. We are about to witness the curse of the Detroit Pistons upon Yair Rodriguez and the fan base who was there that night. Leading homophobic chants was Cain Velasquez and Brian Ortega, both of which I'm sure are going to endure a few years of regret and possible comeuppance in their WWE and UFC careers. This weekend we see the return of El Pantera in a city that is very much not his own, Boston, possibly the most American city in America. All I can say is I hope that the fans there that night can show a little bit more respect than what Jeremy Stevens received when he was on vacation in Mexico. I hope Yair Rodriguez keeps his fingers to himself, and I hope we have ourselves a good fight. We'll see you in Boston.
What makes a great fighter? And what makes a GOAT? When you think of the GSPs, the Demetrius Johnsons, even the John Joneses of the world, not only do they have nearly spotless records, but they have been tested. Jones had a controversial win against Gustafsson in the prime of his career. A lot of people thought that John Jones had lost that fight. A rising star in GSP lost to Matt Hughes with an armbar. Demetrius Johnson was beaten by Dominic Cruz and pushed him out of the 135 division and into 125. In life, it is necessary to fail in order to grow. It is necessary to have those lowest of the low moments. It is necessary to have conflict in your story. The difference between a great and a GOAT is redemption of those failures, redemption of your lowest lows, redemption in your story. Jones took care of Gus inside 3 rounds in their second fight. GSP took care of Matt Hughes inside 2 rounds with an armbar. Demetrius Johnson went on to defend his belt 11 times and has continued his dominance in 1 championship. Redemption. That is the key. Henry Cejudo. 2 losses in 17 fights. 1 against Demetrius Johnson, 1 against Joseph Benavidez. Henry beat Demetrius Johnson in their second fight. Henry redeemed himself. With talks of Henry maybe not returning to 125 pounds, this is my 2 cents. In order for Henry to become the greatest fighter of all time, it takes 1 more. 1 more weight cut, 1 more drop to 125 pounds, 1 more redemption story. Henry Cejudo is 1 win away from being the greatest UFC fighter of all time. It can't be Aljamain. It can't be Cruz. It can't be Faber. In order for Henry to be considered the greatest of all time, he needs to avenge his loss. He needs Joseph Benavidez at 125 pounds. Imagine that resume. A win over Demetrius Johnson, one of the greatest ever. A win over a PED TJ Dillashaw in 32 seconds, one of the greatest bantamweights ever. A win over Marlon Moraes with a black and blue ankle. And a redemption win over Joseph Benavidez, one of the greatest flyweights the UFC has ever seen. All of your losses avenged. All of your wins clean and fair. Your story, legendary. 1 more fight to become the GOAT. 1 more fight for the world to bend the knee to Triple C.
I'm at a loss for words. Episode 10. Episode 10 sure did not disappoint. Am I right? Except for maybe those last couple of minutes. Next week, episode 11 of From the Nosebleeds MMA podcast. We are so excited to bring you post UFC Boston. We are going to be talking about the BMF belt. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for next week.
The most stacked card, and we were just talking about this off the air. It's literally probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 people's main events, 6 possible fights that could be a main event for a fight night all in one card. UFC 244 is going to be crazy. Next week is going to be so much fun.
Let's not forget the fact that Johnny Walker's fight was pushed from the main card because there were so many good fights, and there's not a single title fight on the card.
It's all people's main events.
Oh, it's so awesome.
Don't forget to bend the knee to Triple C as well. Don't be a Richard. Send us out.